Greetings, heroes. It is I, your friendly neighborhood rabbi, and I am here today to talk to you about Jewish holidays. Now, I'm still kind of new at this live streaming Facebook thing. I know there's some buffering and some sound issues and things like that, but we're going to give it a try until we just keep working on it until we get good at learning together this way, or at least until I get good at teaching this way. Nevertheless, I'm really excited today to give you a Jewish holiday roundup of 2019. I think I'm showing my Texas yichus a little bit by saying it's a roundup, but I've never actually drove cattle when I lived in Texas. I was kind of an indoorsy kid, but picked up a lot of the jargon. So that's not what this video is about. So what I want to talk to you today about is the Jewish holidays of 2019. Made a blog post recently where I have all of the major and some of the minor holidays listed out with a little explanation for each one and when they are. But just in case you are a, let's say, visual or auditory learner and not so much a reader learner, I wanted to make an audio-visual presentation of this. So real quick before we get started, a couple of resources I want to make sure you know about. One is a guide that I prepared. It's a free guide. It's called 3 Things Jew Curious People Need in Order to Upgrade Your Jewish Learning. If you want access to that, there is a link in the description of this video, or if you're listening to this on a podcast, there will be a link in the show notes. But just so you know, it's rabbijohncarrier.com/3 things. And you can download that guide. It's some things that I found critical in my own journey over the last, let's say, 20 years that I've been studying about Judaism. And so I thought maybe I could save you, clip a few years off of that for you. So I put this simple guide together that could accelerate your learning. The other thing that I want you to know about is the Jew Curious School. This is an 100% online school that I teach in every single week. I'm there, 3 live streaming lessons per week. Plus, there's a fantastic community of people who can ask me questions, but also support each other in their spiritual journey. So if you want to know about that, that is at jewcurious.school/info. So now we got those resources out of the way. I want to dive right in and see what is happening with the Jewish holidays this year. So I took notes. I don't have them memorized. I know, I know a lot about holidays, but I don't have their dates memorized for this year. Except the Hebrew dates, yes, but the secular or Gregorian calendar changes from year to year. I'll say before I get into that, I just want to give a shout out to some people who have joined us live. We got Ruthie is here, Jessica Cohen is here, Jason Brown, high five, dude. We've got Vanessa is here. Has it started? Yes, it has. So we've got Ruth and we've got Karen and some familiar faces and some new faces as well. So I'm just going to throw in a hi everybody in the chat. Hi every can't spell body. Okay. So as we go through the holidays, feel free to jump into the chat and ask questions, and I'll pause from time to time to take those questions. That's what I love most about doing this live instead of, I've recorded a fair number of videos, but I really like these live Q&A situations. So the first holiday that we're going to talk about has already happened, but just so you could prepare for it for next year. I made this video a little late, I admit that. But a couple weeks ago, we had something called Tu B'Shvat, and Tu B'Shvat was back in January, started sundown January 20th. Tu B'Shvat is, we'll call it the New Year for trees. And, if you're wondering, wait, I thought Rosh Hashanah was a new year. Don't spoil it. We'll get to it. It's not until the fall. Excuse me. But we have this annual cycle for trees, or rather a tree is, when you plant a new tree, you're not supposed to eat the fruit on it for the first few years, according to the Torah, and that it says, okay, you wait a few years before you eat it. And we thought, okay, well, how do we know, how long a tree has been alive? Well, you got to mark its birthday. And you might then ask, how do you know when a tree's birthday is? Like, it doesn't have a birth certificate. You don't even know necessarily what day it, sprouted up out of the ground. And so what we do is we have kind of a fiscal year system whereby every tree gets the same birthday. So sorry, trees. I actually have a friend whose wife is from South Korea, and she said often, families gave when they recorded the birthdays, at least many decades ago. Families basically said all their kids were born on the same day, like different years, but gave the same birthday in the records office. So we kind of do that for trees right now. And so every tree has the same birthday. And according to Rabbi Hillel in the Mishnah, Rosh Hashanah, chapter 1, Mishnah 1, all trees' birthday is on the 15th of Shvat, or if you're writing that in Hebrew, it looks like Tu B'Shvat. So that happened on January 20th. Some people do like a Tu B'Shvat Seder where they get together, they talk about Tu B'Shvat, they have a meal made up of things that come from trees, like like apricots and olives and almonds and all these different things, especially things that come from Eretz Yisrael, the things that grow naturally in the land of Israel. So that's sort of the first holiday of the, we'll say, Gregorian year. Again, we're talking about 2019, not 5779. But just for the sake of people who aren't hip to the Jewish calendar yet, but still want to know about these holidays, that's why we're doing this roundup the way we're doing it. The next holiday, and this one is a little bit more, let's say, widely celebrated than Tu B'Shvat, and that is the holiday of Purim. Some people pronounce it Purim. And that is coming up in March. This year it's going to be on March 20th. It starts sundown March 20th, goes till sundown the 21st. And Purim is a holiday that celebrates, let's say, the redemption of Jews in the Persian Empire many, many hundreds of years ago. There is a story that we learned from Megillat Esther, or the scroll or book of Esther, whereby there was this kind of evil courtier named Haman, boo, who wanted to wipe out all the Jews in the Persian kingdom, and he kind of pulled some strings behind the scenes with the king, said, "Hey, king, please sign this thing, and we'll get rid of all Jews." And the king is kind of a ridiculous figure in this farcical story, and he says, "Okay, whatever you say." And then, unbeknownst to him, he had married, the most beautiful. The king had married the most beautiful woman in all of the kingdom, and she is Jewish, but she kind of hides that fact from him in the beginning. Later on, there's a big reveal. She says, "Hey, if you're going to kill all the Jews, you have to kill me too, your favorite wife." And he says, "Oh, never mind." And they're kind of glossing over some of the details just so we can get through all the holidays. But he doesn't, in fact, he doesn't say never mind. He basically sends out a decree saying, "Well, I can't cancel my earlier decree, but I'll send out another decree saying all the Jews can defend themselves." And that sort of canceled the massacre, as it were, and we survived. So every year we celebrate that with joy and frivolity, let's say, and sometimes there's consumption of intoxicants involved, and there's costumes. Costumes is kind of a big deal because it's this. The story is about shifting identities and people being hidden and then people coming out, and so people wear costumes. People get together and have festive meals and parties and stuff. There is often also what they call a Purim spiel, so it's a play about the story of Esther and the Persian kingdom at that time. Very important also, there is the reading of a scroll. So we read Megillat Esther, we read the scroll of Esther on Purim. And again, because it's in kind of a fun situation, sometimes they intersperse the reading of the scroll with acting it out in costume. So that's a fabulous holiday. It's coming up next month. It starts sundown March 20th, goes through the 21st, and I'll see you there, I guess. So the next holiday we're going to talk about is really a big deal. I'm not just saying it because it's one of my favorite, but it's the first of the three pilgrimage festivals during the year, and that is Pesach. And Pesach, or Passover, is it's a spring holiday that also commemorates our exodus from Egypt, or God redeeming the Bnei Israel from captivity in Egypt, and we got to go free. You know, there was a couple of movies about it. Ten Commandments is a really good movie. Prince of Egypt, if you're into animation, is an even better movie. To this day, I can't get through any single musical number in the Prince of Egypt without crying a little bit. So now you know that about me. That's terribly embarrassing, but you know, that's me. So what we do for Passover, in addition to telling this story and handing this tradition from one generation to another, is we get rid of all the bread in our house, because it says in the Torah, okay, they had to leave so fast, their bread didn't get a chance to rise, so they ate flatbread. But it also says you'll observe this holiday by, you know, getting rid of all chametz in your possession. You can't own any bread or, you know, things made that are kind of bread-like. You can't own it, you can't, you know, see it, and you can't eat it. But you, unless it's like matzah, unless it's specially prepared bread that has not had a chance to rise. So for a week, we don't eat bread. It's a great holiday if you're on paleo, for example. You know, if your diet is mostly meat and veggies anyway, you know, you don't eat, you don't, or if you have a gluten-free diet, a lot of people can get through Passover pretty easily. But if you are accustomed to eating bread, you will eat a different kind of bread for this week. This is considered the first of the three festivals of the year. It happens in the middle of the month of Nisan. In the Gregorian calendar this year, it's happening on at sundown on April 19th. That's the first Seder in the evening of April 19th. And it is a week-long festival that concludes at sundown on April 27th. So following Passover, before I go much further, I'm going to jump back into the chat, see what questions people have. We've got Ruud is here from Norway. Vanessa says hi. We got two people from Norway. We have two Norwegians today. Maybe it could be other Norwegians, but only two people are saying they're from Norway. See brother Jason Brown. Let's see, I forget. Is he from Ireland? I don't know. He gave me the live long and prosper sign in the icon. So fantastic to see everybody here. We got somebody from Toronto. We are international, which is kind of dope to think about. Not seeing any questions about the holidays. Feel free to throw those in there if you have questions about particular holidays, and we'll get to them. Just a lot of great shout outs from around the world. So nothing wrong with that at all. When Karen weighs in, the major Passover cleaning seems overwhelming and kind of scary. And I know about 15 million Jews who would agree with you wholeheartedly on that one. It can be kind of overwhelming, but it's sort of we think of it like a spiritual spring cleaning, if you will. So once a year, you know, we go through our dwelling place and we try to get rid of everything that is chametz, right? And chametz just means something that is leavened or risen. There's an old midrash on this that's saying that leavening or that puffed up bread is kind of like the puffed up things in our own souls or in our character. Some people use the word arrogance, right? And so by getting rid of the chametz, we're getting rid of those puffed up things in our life, those puffed up tendencies that we have, and it makes us humble. So we have this annual sort of physical spring cleaning, but also kind of a spiritual spring cleaning, and it's only once a year. I have heard people who, and this maybe was back in the day, people would actually paint their houses just in case there was any crumbs stuck in the wall or something. Another rabbi taught me that, you know, it used to be a lot easier in the sense that people, you know, dishes were, what's the word? Dishes were more disposable back when people were only using clay dishes for things. They would make dishes, use them temporarily, and then when they were done, they would just break them and throw them on the pile of pot shards and crush up the clay and make new dishes. So people were constantly turning over their dishes anyway, and it's not like having a set of dishes for multiple years that you have to kosher or set aside. So some people work really hard at this, some people work less hard at it, and it's okay, but because Passover is I believe it's the single most observed Jewish holiday. Something like 70% of all Jews attend a Passover Seder or a Passover meal every year, compared to maybe half of Jews fast on Yom Kippur. A smaller percentage observe Shabbat every week, but Passover is like 70% of us observe Passover in some serious way every year. It's many people's favorite Jewish holiday, not just for the brisket, but also for the company, especially because this is the time where people get together and you see people you haven't seen in a while, and multiple families eating in one household, things like that. So I am going to jump back. Okay, we have Jason Brown said yes, the Vulcan salute. Oh, thank you for reminding me. It's not the Vulcan salute. It's Duchanan, right? It's the Kohanim, spreading their hands and blessing congregations. That happens to this day in some congregations in America, and especially in Israel. And that's where Leonard Nimoy got it from when he created the Vulcan hand sign. So thanks for that, Jason. So we're going to shift gears a little bit, because we're going from Passover, which is Zman Cherutenu, the season of our freedom and rejoicing, to something a little bit more, let's say, somber, something that's less a cause of celebration, but a critical thing to observe, and that is Yom Hashoah. And this happens, it's usually less than a couple of weeks after Passover. This year, it's going to be on May 1st. It starts sundown May 1st. Yom Hashoah, or the Day of Catastrophe, is also known as Holocaust Remembrance Day, or it's in Israel. It's remembrance of the Holocaust, but also remembrance of the people who fought back. It also talks about the Warsaw Ghetto uprising and the people who fought back against the Shoah. So every year at this time, we get together. We remember the 6 million Jews who lost their life in the horrible catastrophe that was Nazi Europe. And we just actually recently marked International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is something that was established by the UN after a bunch of other countries were doing it, that commemorated the liberation of Auschwitz and Birkenau by the Red Army. That International Remembrance Day commemorates the loss of life of Jews, but also everybody else. I mean, there were 6 million Jews, but there were 6 million not Jews as well, including Russians, Slavs, Poles. People were killed for being gay. People were killed for being differently abled. Roma people or the Romani people from Europe were killed as well. So we have an International Holocaust Remembrance Day, and that's an international holiday. The specifically Jewish holiday is Yom Hashoah, and that is going to be on May 1st at sundown. Another similarly somber occasion that happens about 6 days later, and that's Yom HaZikaron. This is the Yom HaZikaron means the Day of Remembrance, and this is specifically Memorial Day in Israel for people who have lost their life founding or defending the state of Israel. This happens at sundown on May 7th. And then immediately after this Memorial Day, we have Yom HaAtzmaut, which is, that's going to be sundown on May 8th. That is Israeli Independence Day. And for me, this is always like a really profound connection. If you could imagine what it would be like if, instead of celebrating Memorial Day or observing Memorial Day at the end of May, what if our Memorial Day was on July 3rd? Right. So if we had a day of solemn and somber and serious remembrance of our veterans who lost their life the day before, the big celebration of our independence, right? So Memorial Day in the U.S., there's lots of, great activities that go on. There, veterans get together, people honor the dead, but there's also like, used car sales and things like that, which feels kind of dissonant to me. Imagine if we put our remembering the people who made the ultimate sacrifice in founding and defending this country, if we did that the day before July 4th, when we have the fireworks and the barbecue and all that stuff. So that's kind of how it's done in Israel, where you have this somber day one day, and then As the sun goes down, the mood kind of changes, and then it's this festive celebration of Israel's independence. So it's a real, it's a kind of double-sided holiday there, where we go from solemnity to celebration just as the sun goes down. But I think it's a great way to celebrate your independence by first remembering those who fought for it. So after that, there's another day that is, it's kind of there's sort of a season, and this is a certain point in the season. After Passover, we have this thing called Omer, and Omer means a sheaf, and we count sheaf because Passover was sort of originally also a barley harvest festival. We have this practice of for 7 weeks, for 49 days, we count sheaves of barley, and that's called that's Sfirat Omer, or counting the Omer for the days leading up to the next festival, which is Shavuot. And there is this thing called Lag BaOmer. Lag is Lamed Gimel, but it also means the number 33. So the 33rd day of the Omer, which happens on the 18th day of the Hebrew month of Iyar, marks the day of the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. It's also linked to the Bar Kokhba revolt against the Roman Empire, and it's considered sort of a break in the Omer period. The Omer is kind of a somber period, but on the 33rd day, because we're marking certain things, it's a day of celebration. And so, again, especially in the land of Israel, there's a lot of barbecues and things like that. But also in America, the Habad does a nice barbecue here in Burbank every year on Lag BaOmer. So that is a thing that happens. Lag BaOmer is going to be on May 22nd this year. I'm going to jump back into the chat, see if we have any questions. Let's see. Jason asks, how strict are holidays observed by different movements? Let's see. It sort of varies. I mean, everybody celebrates the big holidays that we're talking about. Some people have different observances around those holidays. There are, how do I put this? You will find, let's say, more traditional households maybe observing more holidays than, some households will do, just kind of the big holidays, and some households will do the big holidays and the minor holidays as well. And, as Jason identifies, sort of everybody does it in a different way. Some people are more strict about the different rules of the holidays and things like that. But even within movements, it sort of varies by household. Val asks, you can have unleavened flour bread. I prefer cassava bread versus matzah. Right. So the things that you can't eat on Passover are things made out of grains like wheat and barley and spelt and oat. But some people will eat things that are not made of normal bread grains like cassava and other gluten-free things like that. Within, I'll say, the Ashkenazi tradition, if it looks like bread, we don't eat that either. So this is something that's called kitniot. If it sort of walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, if it looks like bread, we sort of set it aside just out of the spirit of the thing, so we don't eat things like corn. When we don't eat things like rice. In in Sephardi households, they don't hold by that mishigas, so they might eat corn or rice on Passover, where Ashkenazi will not. The interesting thing is, it is considered a mitzvah to eat matzah, and matzah is specifically made out of the kinds of materials you can't eat. It's just prepared in a different way. If somebody has a gluten issue, if eating matzah will actually impair their health or threaten their life, yes, you do something different. There's almost no mitzvah you're supposed to do instead of living. So you can have cassava bread and things like that. But it's also nice to just kind of observe the spirit of the thing as well. Karen throws in 4 glasses of wine. I don't. So there's a tradition on Passover that we have 4 glasses of wine over the course of the Seder. However, Karen's saying, I don't drink that much. I would be under the table. Look, don't hurt yourself. This also goes for Purim. While many people celebrate Purim with alcohol and other intoxicants in the state of California, especially, you are not supposed to impair your health for these things or endanger your life. A glass of wine, the minimum, the minimum amount of Rabbi eat is like 3 ounces or something like that. So over the course of several hours, you would drink, whatever 4 times about 3 1/3, 3.3 ounces are. Maths, it's like 13, 14 ounces of wine, but you can also use grape juice. That's fine too. You don't have to endanger your health. Many people have grape juice instead, especially people who are, let's say, recovering alcoholics and things like that, where if they drank, it would actually really, really be dangerous for them. So it's totally cool to have grape juice on these occasions. Don't feel like you have to get drunk and sick in order to observe a Jewish holiday. The wine is used as sort of a symbol of our joy, and if you consume it in a way that doesn't bring you joy or it can actually hurt you, then we're kind of missing the point. So don't feel like you have to get loaded to celebrate Jewish holidays, although I'll admit some people do. So in addition to, we're going to go back to the holiday roundup. There's another day in the sort of Israeli national holiday calendar, and that is Yom Yerushalayim. Yom Yerushalayim, or Jerusalem Day, commemorates the reunification of Jerusalem and the establishment of Israeli sovereignty in the Old City in June of 1967. And so we do this. This is celebrated on June 1st of this year. So again, just to wrap up, among our Israeli national holidays, we have Yom Hashoah, which is also observed in America. We have Yom HaZikaron, we have Yom HaAtzmaut, and we have Yom Yerushalayim. Again, Yom Yerushalayim is on June 1st this year at sundown. So there's a lot of these kind of, I'll say, important but not biblical holidays in between 2 festivals, one being Passover and the following one being Shavuot. So I was talking about counting the Omer for 7 weeks leading up to the next festival, and that is Shavuot. Shavuot means weeks because it happens 7 weeks after Passover. And Shavuot has sort of a double significance, like all of our public festivals do. On the one hand, it was a spring harvest festival marking the wheat harvest in the land of Israel, but it also took on an additional significance of marking the revelation of the Torah at Mount Sinai. So the idea is we left Egypt a free people, and I like to think of the connection between Passover and Shavuot as, okay, now that we can do anything we want, what should we do? Right? Now that we are a free people, what is a good way to live? What is a good way for a free people to live? And for me, the answer to that is Torah, right? Now that we can do anything we want, we need a guide to using that freedom in the proper way. And for that, we were given Torah at Mount Sinai, and Shavuot marks that revelation, that Matan Torah, or the gift of Torah to the Bnei Yisrael, to the descendants of our patriarch Yaakov, aka Yisrael. And so on Shavuot, we celebrate getting the Torah. There's also there's a couple of customs that go along with it that aren't maybe obviously connected to getting tablets from a mountain. One is that there's a lot of dairy products. For some reason, it's traditional to eat dairy products. There are a couple of traditional reasons for this. I think it probably just started where, hey, it's Blintz time, or it's good time for cheesecake. It's a summertime, you want some ice cream or something like that. But there are a couple of other explanations that have maybe some greater holiness to them. One is the idea that people sort of stopped eating meat right before Shavuot because it was like, oh, God's going to talk to us and God's going to tell us the right way to slaughter animals and the right amount of time to wait, the right animals to eat and the right amount of time to wait between meat and milk and things like that. So let's all, stop eating meat for a minute until we get the rules. And then after we read the Torah, then we'll know the proper way to eat meat. And so they say that's why we have dairy products on Shavuot. Another tradition was that it says in the Torah that before Shavuot, for 3 days, people were sort of purifying themselves, abstaining from certain mundane activities, and washing their clothes. And if you've been wandering in the desert for 7 weeks, and everybody just washes their clothes on the same day, everybody's going to look really crisp and white, right? Or their clothing is going to look crisp and white. And maybe it's not white exactly, but because who knows what it was made of. But compared to not washing your clothes for 7 weeks, your clothes are going to look pretty clean. And so there's just a sea of bright, freshly laundered clothing, and some people's like, oh, that kind of looks like cheesecake or ice cream or blintzes. So that's another explanation for why we eat dairy products on Shavuot. Again, if you're lactose intolerant, do not impair your health for the sake of this holiday, but maybe find a workaround. So we're going to move once again from festivity to, did I mention Shavuot is going to, might have failed to mention this, Shavuot begins at sundown on June 8th of this year. So moving from celebration to, again, kind of some, seriousness, somber, mournful disposition. On sundown August 10th of this year, we're going to mark Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av means the 9th day of the month of Av, kind of like Tu B'Shvat. Some of our holidays don't have really their own name. It's just like the day of the month that they're on. I guess we do that with July 4th in the United States. But Tisha B'Av, or the 9th of Av, is kind of a catch-all day for everything terrible that ever happened to us, right? It marks the destruction of the first temple. It marks the destruction of the second temple. It marks events that happened during the Holocaust. It marks events that happened, during the Crusades, where the Crusades weren't necessarily about us, but there were a lot of crusaders leaving Christian Europe on their way to liberate the Holy Land, as they thought, from Muslims, and on the way they trashed a bunch of Jewish towns for some reason that boggles the mind. So bad stuff happens to us all the time, unfortunately, and God forbid it happens again. But we mark all of those things on this one mournful day of Tisha B'Av. And I learned this from Rabbi Ed Feinstein. It's important that we have this holiday, as sad and mournful as it is, because if we marked all the occasions of, let's say, genocide or destruction or bad stuff that happened to us on the day that they actually happened, we would literally never stop suffering. We would literally never stop being in mourning. And that's no way to live. That's no way to get through your life. So what we do is we take all of those bad things and we commemorate, and we should be commemorating them. We should be remembering them so that, we can prevent them, God willing, from happening in the future. And we should honor those who lost their lives. But we're going to do it all in the same day and make that sort of a day of super duper mourning, if you will, so that we can get on with our lives the rest of the year, so that we can celebrate on other days. And on that day, it's a fast day. It's the only other fast day besides Yom Kippur that's like a full sundown to sundown 25-hour fast. So that's part of the ways that we commemorate it. The rabbis back in the day said you shouldn't do anything joyful at all. And being rabbis, one of the most joyful things they could think of to do was study Torah. And so this is a day that you're supposed to not study Torah. And the rabbi said, okay, gosh, we can't not study Torah. They said, okay, you can have Echa. You can have the Book of Lamentations. If you're going to study Torah, study the Book of Lamentations. And so in evening services that commemorate Tisha B'Av, there's the reading of the Book of Lamentations, or Echa. And people sit on the ground, people take their shoes off. It's supposed to be like a big Shiva house kind of situation. So people get down low on the ground, people take their shoes off, people are fasting, and someone is reading the Book of Lamentations, Echa, in a particular trope that has this mournful tone to it. So moving from sadness to back to frivolity, if you will, there is a holiday. This sort of comes from more observed from Kabbalah and things like that, called Tu B'Av. So we've gone from the 9th of Av to the 15th of Av, and this is a little bit like it celebrates love, and it's a little bit like Valentine's Day in that sense. Although it's not named after a Christian saint, so that's not happening. Instead, it's named after the day of the month that it's on, Tu B'Av, and it's observed mostly in modern day Israel as this like celebration of love. People go on dates. People it's considered as an especially auspicious day for weddings, and that's happening on August 15th. I think maybe I failed to mention that Tisha B'Av happens on sundown August 10th of this year. Tu B'Av is on August 15th. So that gets us through the summer. And I'm going to go jump in the chat real quick just to check to see if there are any questions before we get into the holiday bonanza of the fall holidays. Let's see. Does wine have to be kosher? Let's see. Getting a bunch of good questions in here now. People are talking about Passover, participating this year. Do families take turns hosting? It's like any other family tradition for Passover. Sometimes, it depends on your chavurah, your kind of group. Like for example, in my house, in our house every year, we host people on the first night, and then we go to our friend's house for the second night. Sometimes I guess families will take turns hosting it from year to year, or they'll have one person who always hosts it. And everybody else brings stuff. It just really varies by community and family and things like that. It is largely a home-based holiday. So if we're talking about Passover, this is something, sometimes there are public seders, and that's fine, right? I think the biggest Passover seder in the world every year is run by Habad in Kathmandu, Nepal. Because I guess there's a lot of people in the area in the springtime who are backpackers and hikers and climbing Everest, and I think there's a lot of like Israeli soldiers getting out and going to Nepal to do some trekking, and so they host this massive Passover Seder with like 2,000 people in a hotel. There's some people go on like Passover holidays rather than cleaning their own house. They'll just lock up their house for the week and go on a cruise that's specifically designed for celebrating Passover, or go to a resort or something like that. But by and large, it is a home-based celebration. I mean, there are Passover services at the synagogue and things like that, but the seders are by and large done at home. And this is what attracts a lot of people to Judaism, to Jewish holidays and Jewish celebrations, is this idea that you don't have to go to another building with stained glass and books and shushing in order to get close to God, in order to get close to other people in a religious setting. You can do this stuff at home, right? And so that's what a lot of people love about Passover. So different people host it. Does wine have to be kosher? So people have various opinions about the kashrut of wine. I have various opinions about the kashrut of wine. It's sort of an area of specialty for me. We're stricter about kashrut generally on Passover because we have to make sure that the wine doesn't have any kind of leavening agents in it and things like that. So some people insist on strictly hechshered wine, meaning it's got the symbol on it from somebody who's supervised it. Some people will say that for instance, one of my teachers, Rabbi Dorf, did a tshuva back, I want to say in the 80s, that you can trust that pretty much any, you won't be eating anything treif or consuming anything treif if you have domestically produced wines in the U.S., for example, because he toured a number of facilities and saw that they weren't using unkosher things in making the wine. So I don't want to go on that tangent because it's a whole other subject. But some people insist that their wine be marked kosher and supervised kosher. Some people not so much. So ask your rabbi. If you're being hosted, ask your hosts what they would prefer, what you should bring. Many years ago, before I knew anything to do, I actually brought. Somebody invited me over for Passover, and I brought a box of Godiva chocolates because I thought that was a nice thing to do as a guest, bring these. And what I didn't know was that he wasn't even allowed to, we're not even allowed to own things that might have leavening in them. So like I had to, he was very, very kind, a little bit embarrassed. You know, he didn't shame me about it. He just says, okay, I'm going to have to leave these in the garage or something like that. So if you're being hosted for Passover, ask what you can bring, or don't insist necessarily on bringing anything. But before you bring anything, ask, because somebody might be observing Passover in such a way that you could bring them something and they'd be very embarrassed to say, you got to leave that on the porch. I can't even have it in the house. So I just want to jump into some of these things in the chat. Okay, Roots being pretty active. Karen is there. William Morales. This is a leap year. How does this affect the holidays? Why do we set aside 2 months of Adar during the leap year? That's an excellent question. We just marked Rosh Chodesh Adar Aleph, or Adar Rishon. In order for our calendar to sync up both with the lunar cycle and the solar cycle, we follow what's called a Metonic. I think it's called Metonic. My Greek isn't that good. Cycle where out of every 17 years, 9 of those years are leap years, and instead of like the Gregorian leap year is you add a day every 4 years. In the Metonic cycle, you add a month on 9 out of 17 years because the Hebrew months are typically shorter than the Gregorian calendar months. And so we'll add a month on certain leap years like we do this year. And the rabbi said, hey, if you're going to add a month, add the best month, add Adar, because that is, Misha Niknas Adar Marbim B'Simcha, like, as you enter Adar, your joy is supposed to increase. It's also the month that we have Purim in. So if you're going to double up a month, Adar is a pretty dope month to double up. So that's what we do. It doesn't. We don't have 2 Purims. Unfortunately, we'll do Purim on in the first month of Adar. The second month of Adar, not so much. But let's see. Somebody asked the question, can you attend Habad meals without being officially Jewish? I don't speak for Habad. You'd have to ask them. But in my experience, the answer is usually yes. But if you have a question about that, ask your local Habad house what their policy is. Habad is generally a very warm and welcoming place. So, but I can't speak for each local, because each local Habad house is kind of its own deal with its own rabbi. So ask them and they'll let you know. And I'm going to guess that by and large the answer is yes. So which calendar app do you recommend? Somebody's asking. I like Hebcal. It's hebcal.com. That's a website. I have a particular app on my phone called I want to say it's called the Pocket Luach. Let me look that up. I never actually check on. I've had it for years. Yeah, it's called Pocket Luach. So pocket, like, spelled like pocket. Luach is spelled in English Luach, and that's a great app that you program in your zip code, and it not only has all the holidays mapped out, but it'll do like candle lighting times and prayer service times and things like that for you based on your zip code. So if you're looking for a phone app, I like Pocket Luach. If you're looking at something with like a website with a Hebrew calendar for holidays, I recommend hebcal.com. There's also a great site called myzmanim.com, myzmanim. And again, you type in your zip code or the name of your city, and it'll tell you. It's not great for like looking out in the future of holidays, but on a particular day, it can tell you when sundown is, when's candle lighting time, when's Havdalah time, things like that. So let's see. We're about 45 minutes in, guys. I really appreciate everybody hanging out with me for this. We're learning an awful lot about holidays, getting some great feedback, some great questions. Love doing this live, and it's been pretty cool. It's been pretty cool. We'll keep doing this. So good thing, because we're about to run into a bonanza of fall holidays. So before we even get into fall holidays, we have like a month of prep time, and that is the month of Elul. So Rosh Hashanah is the first of Tishrei, but before that, we have a whole month of kind of holy preparation, what's called, excuse me, I need to take a little drink of water here because we're about to talk about a lot of holidays. That is good H2O. So I didn't mean to spell it out for you. So for the month of Elul, the whole month leading up to Rosh Hashanah, this is considered a season of what's called Cheshbon HaNefesh, or examining the soul, or self-examination, where you kind of look back at the year that has passed. You think about, okay, what am I proud of? What am I not so proud of? What are some ways I might like to change in the coming year? What are some things that I need to make amends for that I've done either between me and God or between me and another person? And to help remind us of this season of Heshbon HaNefesh, there is a custom of blowing the shofar every day during Elul except for Shabbat. And so, if you live in a city with a lot of Jews, you might hear these things that sound like trumpet blasts first thing in the morning. Don't get scared. It's just a shofar. It's a ram's horn being blown. Maimonides calls this kind of like a wake-up call for the soul, or it's sort of like, I don't know if he had alarm clocks back then, but it's almost like an alarm clock waking you up to evaluate your life, to make plans for self-improvement, to make amends with other people, to make amends with God if that relationship has been impaired in any way. And so that's the month of Elul, is this kind of spiritual preparation. And then that concludes with, I guess, Rosh Hashanah Tishrei, better known as Rosh Hashanah, or the head of the year. This is the New Year's Day on the Jewish calendar. As I mentioned before, with Tu B'Shvat, there's actually four. It's considered there are 4 New Years in the Mishnah for various different cycles, but for the marking the year, where let's say we turn the calendar over from 5778 to 5779, that's Rosh Hashanah. And so Rosh Hashanah is this New Year's Day, but it also is beginning this sort of intense, short season of tshuva, of making amends with other people, making amends with God, and turning your life around. Really, the word tshuva means return, like returning to the correct path. And so that happens over the course of 10 days, called the Aseret Yemei Tshuva, or like the 10 days of repentance, or the 10 days of repair or improvement or returning to the right path, beginning with Rosh Hashanah and ending with Yom Kippur. And so on Rosh Hashanah, people get together. It's a very festive time. There are many religious traditions where people don't observe all the holidays except maybe 1 or 2 a year. And if you're going to the temple or synagogue or something, once or twice a year, you're typically doing it on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. As I joke with some of my Christian friends, it's like, how some people come to this pastor colleague of mine. I say, how some people come to your church just on Christmas and Easter, just those 2 days a year? And he's like, yeah. And he's like, well, some of our people do that too, only those days are 10 days apart, right? So they're just coming for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. I'm not telling stories. People know, people have all sorts of different behavior. I don't judge them. It's not for me to judge. That's God's business, and that's kind of gets us back to Rosh Hashanah. It's sort of considered a day of judgment. In addition to being a celebration of a new year, it's a day where we have a tradition that God sort of opens up the book of life and says, okay, who's going to have a good year? Who's going to have a bad year? And that book is open on Rosh Hashanah, and that book is closed on Yom Kippur. So after a month of kind of evaluating our lives, we have this intense 10-day period of making amends with people, of making plans to be a better person in the year to come. That starts in kind of celebration on Rosh Hashanah. People get together. They have various traditional foods, a lot of sweet foods because we like the new year to be sweet. Other places like literally eat heads. I think there's a Sephardic custom of having maybe a sheep's head cooked on the table, and there's an Ashkenazic custom of having like a fish head on the table, as get it, the head of the year. But so it sort of starts in festivity, and then there's this 10 days of repentance, and then it ends with kind of the repentance Super Bowl, if you will. I don't know if people like sports metaphors in their religion, but here goes. So this is considered the most intense day of repentance, of getting right with God, of getting right with other people. It's also considered the holiest day of the Jewish year. That is Yom Kippur. And so on this day, people fast. This is our other fast day. Or people say, Tisha B'Av is the other fast day. This is the main fast day where people are sort of, for the purposes of self-affliction, and putting us in the frame of mind for tshuva. People fast. They don't. Some people don't eat any food or water for a 25-hour period. It can be done. It's not comfortable necessarily, and if it would jeopardize your life or health in any way, it's considered forbidden to fast. But if you if you're strong enough, it's a good thing to fast on Yom Kippur. It does put you in a very spiritual frame of mind by the end of the day. Other things that you don't do is some people refrain from wearing leather shoes or any kind of leather whatsoever, because this was considered kind of a comfort item back in the day. It's also requires taking a life in order to wear leather. I'd spoil it for you. So we don't want to be going around, wearing dead animals on a day that we're supposed to uplift our hearts to God. We're supposed to refrain from, I don't know, sort of excessive primping, like perfume, makeup, stuff like that. Not supposed to bathe in a luxurious way. I mean, you can wash your hands for hygienic reasons and things like that. You don't want to be making people sick again on that day when most people are in the synagogue. But you're not supposed to just go out of your way to look fancy with perfume and all this stuff. And also, no marital relations. This is something that is also abstained from on Yom Kippur. And so once the sun goes down on Yom Kippur, you've had sort of a marathon day of praying and fasting and kind of real introspection, maybe in the midst of a crowd of people who are also working on introspection. That kind of ends festively when the sun goes down. People get together to break the fast, and that's a party. And that happens on October 9th of this year. If I forgot the day for Rosh Hashanah starts sundown September 29th. Yom Kippur starts sundown October 8th. So before we continue on the fall holidays, because those are some big ones, I'm going to go back to the chat, check any questions we have. Let's see. Which calendar app, which month of Adar. Excellent. So we're going to jump back into the fall holidays. We've had our Yamim Norim, our days of awe. That's another name for Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Also, days of awe. Some people call them, days of awesomeness or awesome days. But we move from also most popularly known as the high holy days or the high holidays. But we're not done with fall holidays, folks. Just because we've had Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, there's a ton more partying left to do. Recently, I had a few different rabbis on my podcast talking about their favorite high holidays, or their favorite fall holidays, I should say. And 2 out of 3 rabbis say that their favorite fall holiday is Sukkot. Sukkot is the third of the 3 pilgrimage festivals, these 3 sort of public festivals that we have going back to the time of the Torah. Sukkot means booths or huts. It's a week-long festival. It starts this year on October 13th when the sun goes down. And for a week, we are supposed to dwell in kind of temporary shelter, right? And the reason for this, first, it started off as sort of a fall vegetable harvest. That's when you bring in all your crops for the year. That's when you have the greatest abundance. If you're a farmer, your richest day of the year is harvest day, and that's when you have the biggest party, right? But it also helps us remember that time when we dwelt in temporary dwellings in the wilderness. So just as Passover marks the exodus from Egypt, Shavuot marks the receiving of Torah at Mount Sinai, Sukkot marks our 40 years of wandering in the wilderness, where we had temporary shelters. We didn't have really a home or protection or shelter except for God, right? This in our time of greatest abundance following the harvest, it helps us to remember how tenuous our existence can be and how much we depend on God for protection and shelter and peace. And so at our time of greatest abundance, we are humble about it, and that's what Sukkot is all about. And again, it's some people's their favorite holiday because it can be festive. It's often done outdoors. People build these little temporary huts outside and eat in them, and some people sleep in them even if the weather's nice. But that's Sukkot, is this week-long festival. And at the end of that, after the 7 days, there is this eighth day of assembly, or Shmini Atzeret. Uh, and the eighth day of assembly is like, it's kind of like, it feels like it's part of Sukkot, but it's actually distinct from Sukkot. Uh, so it's like a market. There's a midrash on this that says, it's talking about God as a king, and it's like the king invites his family over to stay for a week, and they stay and they celebrate and they enjoy each other's company for a week. And after 7 days, people are about to leave, and the king says, "You know what? Just let's have one more day together." Uh, and that's supposed to describe kind of how God feels about us. We've been partying together for a week, and just let's just have one more day. And so that we'll have an eighth day of assembly, and that is Shmini Atzeret. Following Shmini Atzeret, we have Simchat Torah. Simchat Torah means rejoicing in the Torah, just as we celebrate receiving the Torah from Mount Sinai, or on Mount Sinai, or at Mount Sinai from God. We also have another holiday that celebrates the Torah, that celebrates learning, that celebrates the gift of this guide to life, and also marks the end of the annual reading cycle. So we have a tradition of reading the entire Torah, or the entire 5 books of Moses, every single year. And some people do it in like a 3-year cycle. But in any case, Simchat Torah is sort of when it turns over. Like we finish reading the scroll, or we get to the end of the scroll, and we roll it back again and start reading it again from the beginning, Bereshit, right, in the beginning. So we do that on Simchat Torah, and it's a day of public celebration. I remember hearing stories that even in the Soviet Union, when Jews had a very tenuous existence and were punished for being Jewish in public, many Jews would get outside and like carry Torah scrolls around the street on Simchat Torah. So we have just a couple of holidays left to go. We have Yom Aliyah. Let's see, the Simchat Torah, let me back it up, is going to be October 21st at sundown. So a couple more days to go. We have Yom Aliyah, the Day of Ascent, or the Day of Immigration to Israel. This happens sundown on November 4th this year. It's an Israeli national holiday that is established to acknowledge people who take that big journey, take that big leap to immigrate to Israel. There's another holiday called Sigd. I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. It's from Amharic, the language in Ethiopia. And it's a holiday that's celebrated by the Ethiopian Jewish community on the 29th of Heshvan. It's exactly 50 days after Yom Kippur. This is an Ethiopian tradition that this is the date that God revealed God's self to Moses through the burning bush. So this is a holiday that comes from the Ethiopian Jewish community. This year is going to be on November 26th at sundown. And finally, one more holiday to go. I really appreciate everybody hanging in with me to do this. We're almost at the hour mark. Hanukkah, right? This is the big, at the end of, we'll say, the secular calendar year. We have Hanukkah, which is our festival of lights. The word means dedication or rededication. Historically commemorates a day that the Seleucids, or sort of Hellenized Syrians, who had conquered Jerusalem and schmutzed up our temple and kicked us out and forbade Jewish worship and all this bad stuff. We fought back. We got the temple back, but it was in bad condition and we had to rededicate it. And so Hanukkah marks that victory and that rededication. It's sort of a holiday that celebrates religious freedom, people's commitment to be able to worship how they wish. And so we do that by having 8 days of lights. And so we have something called a Hanukkah. Other people call it a menorah. Menorah is sort of a generic word for a lamp. A Hanukkah is specifically that lamp that we light on Hanukkah. And it has room for 8 candles plus one more, which we use to light the other candles. And so for 8 nights, we light one candle on the first night, 2 candles on the second night, 3 candles on the third night, and so on till we've got the full menorah. And not for nothing, this happens usually close to the astronomical, not the equinox. What's the solstice? It's the winter solstice. It is the longest night of the year, literally the darkest day of the year. We fight back against that darkness by having a festival of light, and many cultures have this sort of light festival in the darkest time of the year. Our version of that is Hanukkah. So uh, we are celebrating both. We're celebrating religious freedom. We're celebrating sort of a victory of the underdog, if you will. But we're also kind of celebrating that Torah gives us light even in the darkest moments. And so that's Hanukkah. Big part of Hanukkah celebration is fried food, because part of the story was rededicating the temple and having a miracle where some oil lasted longer than it was supposed to. And so, hey, it's an oil holiday. Let's fry some stuff. And so somewhere along the line, we picked up a recipe for latkes. This happened probably in Poland in medieval times. Some people fry donuts, and sufganiyot are like these Israeli jelly donuts. So we have light, we have fried food, we have a lot of high fives. Some families get presents for 8 days, and it's some people's favorite holiday. So I think mine is probably Yom Kippur for reasons that defy explanation. But I like Yom Kippur for its kind of introspective, meditative aspect. You may not know this about me, but I'm a huge introvert, and so Yom Kippur is a day where just sort of focusing on my relationship with God. Other people's favorite holiday is Passover because of all the festive food and getting together. Some people don't like the cleaning so much. So I'm going to just jump back into the chat to see if we have any more questions. This has been a fantastic discussion, I'll say. I know I've been doing most of the talking, but I really appreciate everybody who's kind of weighed in and asked questions and given opinions and things like that. So this is going to take the audio from this and put it into the Jew Curious show very soon. We're kind of changing up the format of the Jew Curious show a little bit, where we'll continue to have great guests coming up, but we'll also have some of these discussions of Jewish topics with live feedback via YouTube Live. I really appreciate everybody who's kind of played today, everybody who's jumped in and asked questions. A good way to stay connected, to know when these things are going to be, is to download that guide, the 3 things Jew curious people need in order to upgrade your Jewish learning. You'll not only get that guide, but you'll be added to a list that you get updates of when these live discussions are. And another way that we can continue learning together, I'll say in a more interactive way, is through the Jew Curious School. So if you're a part of the Jew Curious School, you not only get to have this great kind of havara of other people who are on a similar path to you and can support you on your journey, but you can also jump into that community and ask me questions and get direct answers from me, not just in this kind of like live bonanza that we're doing right now, but in a more private setting, let's say. But beyond the community, we also have classes. We have 3 live classes every week, and those classes are all recorded. So if you're in a different time zone, somebody was asking me earlier, can I be in the Jew Curious School if I live in Dublin? I was like, well, I hope so, because we've got people from Thailand and Germany and Australia and Alaska and Cyprus and Canada and Florida and Fullerton and exotic places like Southern California. So everybody can either be learning together live or watch the archived versions of those classes at your own leisure, at your own pace. So it's a great way to connect with other people just like you, to ask direct questions to a rabbi who gets you. I think I came from a non-traditional Jewish background, or not a Jewish background at all, into Jewish life, into Torah study. And so there's no question anybody could ask me that is going to embarrass me or be a dumb question, because trust me, I've asked dumber. I'll just put it that way. So thanks again, everybody, for learning with me. I'm going to sign off for right now. Stay tuned for our next live discussion. And until next time, Shabbat Shalom and peace.